some of the forest reserves are causing some major species like elephants to migrate out of their current zone because their land is no more good enough for them. They have to go very far away to look for food. So these are just the general reasons why we are experiencing biodiversity loss more broadly and also in Ghana.
Okay, thank you so much, Don. As you've established so many causes of biodiversity loss, can you go a bit deeper into how specifically climate change is causing biodiversity loss?
Okay. That's a very important question because as maybe one thing that I should have pointed out, which you just talked about, is climate change and its contribution to biodiversity loss. Because apart from all the human activities, which we know also drives climate change. Climate change in itself is also a major reason why we are losing our biodiversity. And it's important to know the connection between climate change and biodiversity. Because you realize that, the climatic condition of a place goes a long way to determine the kinds of species that can live there or that can settle there. So in areas that have warm climate, there are certain specific kinds of plants or animals that live there. So we know that in the savanna, for example, there are specific kinds of trees that can survive there for almost the whole year with limited water. The same applies to different kinds of animals or fauna. And so anytime there's a change or there's an alteration in the weather or the climatic condition of any place, it means that the kinds of species or biodiversity that we have there will have to find a way to deal with that change. And the problem we're experiencing now globally is the fact that the ongoing climate change or change in weather conditions as we're experiencing are beyond what the global environment has known for a long time. So in several parts of the world, and I'll give examples, we are having a situation whereby there's an alteration of ecosystems. When I say alteration of ecosystems, if you take forest ecosystems, there's a clear evidence that because of extreme heat or high temperatures that we're experiencing, the forest systems are going to shrink because now it's becoming difficult for different kinds of flora to grow. So they are now becoming more savanna. So in Ghana, for instance, if you think of the different kinds of agroecological regions, we know that from the north we have the Guinea savanna, then you come down to a zone where we call the transition zone. And now, increasingly, because of high temperatures, the forest belt, which comes down to Ashanti region, the Bono, the Western, are declining. And there's a lot of evidence of some studies showing that the forest is shrinking because the plants are not able to grow, and that is a problem. So there's an alteration of ecosystems due to climatic change because of higher temperatures, limited rainfall, and all that. So that's a big problem. And then the other issue that I think we can talk about is the shift in species distribution. And this is related because, like I mentioned, when we have changes in humidity, for instance, or changes in rainfall amount, or changes in temperature, it means that certain species are not able to survive under the new conditions. So they may have to migrate or move away from their original home to a new place. And that's what we call distribution of species. In doing so, some of them will die. And as they keep moving, they may need to settle in a new place where the weather is conducive. But the big problem is that nowhere cool, as they say. Almost everywhere is experiencing different kinds of climatic conditions. So climate change is causing certain species to shift from where they used to be to new places in search of, maybe proper environment. One example I can give is that, migratory birds, move all year round to different parts of the world. Herons, for instance, they move from America to Ghana. Did you know that, birds that you see in wetlands or in marshy areas are birds that are coming from as far as the US, on a yearly basis? Because, at that time when there's snow there, they move to Ghana so that they can enjoy the weather here and also be able to live. But here's a situation whereby now we have very no water at all. Let's say the wetlands have been destroyed and the climate is made that there's dryness in the area. So when they come, what happens? They will not survive. They will die. They don't have enough energy to be able to grow back. So that is also something that is a big problem. There's also the issue of increased vulnerability, of different kinds of species in ecosystems. So even though some plants or some animals are able to move, some are not able to move. by virtue, just like human beings, there are different kinds of characteristics. When there's danger, some people by virtue of their strength will move, but some are not able to move, so they have to still stay in a particular ecosystem, either in a forest or in a savanna zone or in a coastal area. But because the conditions are also changing rapidly, they're not able to move, and so they're becoming more and more vulnerable to the impact of different climatic conditions. In the coastal areas, for instance, flooding is a major concern, or high tides. Every year we hear about coastal communities in Ghana getting flooded. People don't tend to think about the impact it has on other kinds of biodiversity apart from human beings. People think that it's just human beings, but several other kinds of crustaceans or other sea coastal related biodiversity destroyed because of that. If there, for instance, we know that in coastal areas, the connection between the sea and the land is very intricate. But in a situation whereby now there's high levels of sea level rise, it's going to impact on some species that are found in the lagoon. So there could be excessive salinization of salt, and that's going to be an impactful thing. It will harm different kinds of species. So these are also generally things that are being driven by climate change, because fundamentally the climatic conditions that different kinds of biodiversity are used to or are known to experience over time are not the same. One other example I can point out is that when it comes to reproduction levels of different species, that certain kinds of species require a certain sort of humidity to reproduce. Or even, there's a lot of evidence to show that in some areas where the kind of humidity that are needed by some animals to fertilize their eggs are at a certain level. But now with extreme heat, they're not getting that. So there'll be less eggs to fertilize, and also there'll be less amount of time for them to do that because they usually have a period of time. So these are all examples to show the kind of impact that climate change is having on biodiversity. Hence, the need to think about how we can address this challenge.